If you're thinking about building a custom home in the Lake Tahoe, Truckee region, this episode could save you hundreds of thousands of dollars, months of delays, and a tremendous amount of stress. Today, we're going to break down why construction is so expensive, what really causes projects to go over budget, and the alternative more buyers are choosing today. And I'm sitting down with Dave Gove, a fantastic real estate professional based out of the Truckee Tahoe region. Dave, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
For people that don't know you, do you want to give a brief intro of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. So I am what I call a recovering general contractor who is now a real estate professional. I came up through the trades and basically I started on a custom home crew when I was about 19 years old up here in the Lake Tahoe Basin and was a laborer. And as a laborer, you're at the bottom of the totem pole. And I decided that I didn't want to be a laborer and I wanted to be a carpenter. And then I became a carpenter and I decided I didn't want to be a carpenter. I wanted to be a project manager. I didn't want to be a project manager. I wanted to be a general contractor. And so on and so forth. So over the course of 30 years, I have just continued to make my way up the food chain. And I've worked, like I said, as a general contractor. I've worked every aspect of the trades. I've worked on essentially every type of home that there is, from apartments and high rises, single family homes. I've had a chance to get my hands dirty on all of them. Let's see, I think it was about 2013. I was managing a multifamily project, building condominiums in Truckee. And one of my roles was to do the warranty or the final delivery of the product to the homeowners and do the walkthrough with their agents and talk about the punch list and the warranty and so on and so forth. And after about doing, 8 or 10 of those walkthroughs and listening to the questions the agents had representing these buyers, I realized that there was a big knowledge gap. And I decided to pivot again and went and got my real estate license. And that has led to me now at this point being a real estate, helping people transact, buy and sell, real estate agent. And then also now I'm working on some of my own development projects and have had a wide variety of experiences within the housing industry.
That's excellent. Very rarely do you meet real estate professionals that have gone all the way from using a shovel to now what you're doing. Typically it's, hey, I got into real estate and I've never constructed a home in my life. So you're the perfect person to talk about this. Let's get right into it. Why is construction so expensive in our region, the greater Lake Tahoe region?
We have up here what I consider to be what I call the perfect storm of building codes, right? So in California, today we're recording in Nevada. Obviously we know that Lake Tahoe is in California and Nevada. California has some of the most strict building codes in the United States, and Nevada's not too far behind, especially up here in the mountain region. So we have in California seismic, right? So they have to be earthquake safe. Wildland urban interface, right? So we live in the forest and we have to make our houses, forest fire resistant. And then we have California Title 24, which is energy codes, right? So we've got the solar, we've got the insulation, we've got the insulated windows, we've got all of these things, the water, restrictive fixtures, the appliances, so on and so forth. And then in our region, we have snow load. So these things, just that right there is some of the stuff that makes our houses physically the most expensive to build. And then on top of that, we have regulatory burden.
There's so many boxes that have to be checked building in this region. Okay, so the regulatory burden, let's go down there. Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so especially in our region here, one of the things that would fall into the regulatory burden category would be the TRPA, right? So when you're in...
And that is, for people that don't know, Tahoe Regional Planning Agency. And they govern...
Yeah, so that's right. So the Tahoe Regional Planning or Protection Agency, planning or protection, it's one of the two, right? They govern inside the Lake Tahoe Basin, where we're sitting today. So basically from the ridge line surrounding the Lake Tahoe Basin down to the water line. Any project that you're going to do falls into that additional regulatory body, and they are going to tell you what you can and can't do. They're going to take probably at least a year to tell you what you can and can't do.
Really?
Yeah.
So the permitting process, and you're talking about getting permits from them?
Well, so that's just the TRPA, right? Okay. So you've got TRPA approval, but then you still need your building department approval. And so the building department is the jurisdiction that's going to be in charge of taking a look at your construction documents, right? So those are what people we used to be called blueprints. We just call them construction documents or plans at this point. Your structural engineering, your civil engineering, your Title 24, all of those things. That's just the building department. You have to have TRPA sign off before you get to the building department.
Okay. So TRPA could take up to a year.
Yeah.
And then the building department could take...
It depends, right? Yeah. So depending on which building department you're working with, right now, Placer County's pretty efficient. El Dorado County's a hot mess. The town of Truckee's pretty efficient. But at any given time, you don't know what their workload is going to be. They're not necessarily sitting there waiting for you to drop your plans off and they're going to pick them right up and look at them, right? So I think their turnaround typically is, 60 working days to get your first round of comments back. I mean, I've never seen a set of plans that gets approved on the first pass, right?
Yeah.
Their job is to find something. So they're going to get some comments back. You're going to take those comments and give them to your design professionals. They're not necessarily sitting around waiting for something to do. So it sits on their desk for 2 or 3 weeks. So typically we say, not including TRPA, from the time that you buy a piece of dirt, by the time that you're applying for your permit, it's about a year, to a year and a half by the time that you actually get a permit and you can start digging.
Is that only inside the basin when dealing with TRPA? Or is that also Truckee too?
So only in the basin is TRPA.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's say somebody building in the basin versus in Truckee. Is the timeline shorter in Truckee?
Yeah, the timeline's shorter in Truckee and outside of the basin. So if you're in, Alpine, Palisades, Truckee, anything outside of that rim, you don't have that TRPA oversight.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's shorter by quite a bit than a year then.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, that's just at the very beginning of, what makes it so expensive to build up here.
So you're a year to a year and a half in before you get your permits.
You're a year to a year and a half in before you get your permits. Already, depending on what level of construction, what level of quality that you're doing, you're into your design professionals, let's say anywhere from $40,000 to upwards of hundreds of thousands of dollars in consultant fees, right?
So you're talking
architectural, structural, civil engineering, any acoustic if you want it. Some of these houses, these trophy houses that people build up here are, tremendously engineered. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. So you can be into the process a year to 2 years and several $100,000 before you break ground. And that several $100,000, not necessarily including the permit fees, and permit and impact fees. So we did pull a permit. One of my custom builders, a spec builder, pulled a permit last week, and hopefully I can get those numbers over to you pretty quick here. But this is in the town of Truckee, and my experience leads me to believe that we're going to be right around 6 figures just for the permit and impact costs. So you've got your building department fee, right? They're going to charge you a plan check fee to look at the plans. Then they're going to charge you the building permit itself. But then you have impact fees. So you've got fire department, you've got schools, you've got park and rec, you've got sewer, you've got power, you've got water. And so all of those things tack on to that cost of building before you even start to move dirt.
So how can somebody get a good idea of what it's all going to cost them? Do they talk to somebody like you? Where do you go to find that information?
So, all right. So now we've got our building permit, right? We've got our plans and we got our building permit, and we're unpacking why it costs so much to build up here. The next constraint that we have is our labor costs, right? So unfortunately, in the United States, going back 40-ish years, we decided that the trades were basically a second class of citizens, and we invested heavily in a university system that rewards people to have bachelor's degrees to, at this point, make your cup of coffee. We have not invested in trade schools, and then therefore we have not really invested in those tradesmen, right? So there's just not a lot of people doing it. So supply and demand, right? We've got a big demand up here. We've got a huge demand for housing because of the, quote unquote housing crisis in, the Western United States, and especially in these mountain towns. And we just don't have that many people doing the trades. So tradesmen they command a lot of money. I mean, there's, a general contractor is paying his carpenters $75, $80 an hour, for their total compensation, which includes, again, regulatory burden, right? All the insurances, the workman comp, the payroll taxes, somebody to manage the payroll, all that stuff. And it all just trickles down to the consumer building these expensive homes. So the other challenge that we have regionally up here is we have these gigantic winters, right? So our productivity and efficiency just gets cut in half during the winter. Among other things, like that's essentially big picture why it costs so much to build up in the Sierra Nevadas.
So you're talking labor costs are just supply and demand of workers, tradesmen, and then also inefficiency due to the winters. It's hard to build in 10 feet of snow.
I mean, so that's basically the tip of the iceberg on why it's so expensive to build up here, right? And that's just any construction project. Another challenge that I see with new construction, custom homes is how long it takes. And that's just because the way the system is set up. People get really excited about building a custom home because it is exciting, right? It's a neat process to go through. But what I think gets lost in the romantic idea of building a home like that is how difficult it is and how many decisions need to be made and the deal fatigue that can come with that decision making. And so one of the things that gets packed into building a custom home is the cost of the overhead for the builder. The longer a project takes, the more it costs. Like, for example, the last time that I was working as a project manager for a general contractor was about 10 years ago. And we were working over in Truckee on some high-end projects in Martyrs Camp. And my fee that the builder was charging just for me to be on that one job was $7,500 a month. Now, that $7,500 a month gets charged every month, no matter what's going on with the project. And so let's say, for example, we're waiting on a decision that needs to be made by, a homeowner or a designer or anybody that's involved in the decision-making process. And there's a lag time, like I mentioned earlier in the permitting process. If you've got to document something and get it over to an engineer or a designer or an architect, they're not necessarily ready to jump on your project. Maybe it sits on their desk for a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. Well, the meter's still running on a guy like me. And the meter's still running for a general contractor for their insurance, project management costs in the office, the overhead of running the business, keeping the office going, keeping the trucks going, keeping the course of construction insurance going. So what we see is these projects taking a really long time for the regulatory process, the permitting process, and then if every single decision isn't made ahead of time, which it never is, then you draw out this process of building the home, and just the fees for all that stuff, it just stacks up and up and up and up. And that's where you start to get into these numbers that these days builders are quoting $1,200 a square foot, $1,500 a square foot, $2,000 a square foot for these beautiful luxury homes that we're making up here.
Are homeowners still producing a return when they build these? So let's say you build for $1,500, $2,000 a square foot. Is the home value still worth more than that once it's all said and done? That's
a great question. And it would depend on the property, the location, and the comp values of the neighborhood.
It's all case by case basis.
It's all case by case basis. And I do see I do see the consumer looking at the availability of some product on the market, and they think, you know what, I'm just going to buy a piece of dirt, and how hard could it be? I'm going to go through this process and I'll save a bunch of money. And nothing could be further from the truth, right? And so, when we're advising clients, and I say we because my wife's an architect, and so I'm involved in some of the conversations that happen on that side of the transaction as well. These aren't investments to bolster your financial portfolio, right? These are investments this is an investment in your lifestyle. This is an investment in your family. This is an investment in your legacy. if you're looking at a short-term return on one of these deals, then run for the hills. It's just not there. I helped my wife do an analysis on a rehab project over on Donner Lake, and we're looking at it, big round numbers. I think they bought a property for $1.5 million or something like that. And what they wanted to do was going to cost about $1 million, right? So easy numbers, it's $2.5 million. Well, the comps max out at about $1.8 million in that neighborhood.
Wow.
So, but it's a cool project.
Right.
And so the question is like, what are you in it for? I mean, are you in it for short-term gain? Or is this, like I said, is this a legacy thing? Is this something that you're going to be using, to create memories with your family over the next decade? And if it's the latter, then ultimately the valuation, history shows us that the valuation will eventually catch up, but you need to have that long lens to look at it and be able to understand that, like, yeah, this project's going to be in the red for 5 to 7 years. 10 years down the road, it's going to look like a good investment.
Right. It seems more like a legacy piece of art.
Yeah.
Like you said, an investment in a lifestyle. It's a custom piece of art. If you build it custom, no one's going to have anything like it in the area. And those homes are so cool to go into and see. And there's so many of them around the lake too now that are so unique to that person. You can almost understand the person that owns the home just by walking through it.
But that's a good point that you bring up, but there's also a trap there, right? Like, you don't want to make it too unique.
It's hard to sell.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a fine line of making it very cool and your style. But I've gone into some homes that, they put a lot of money into, and like, there's only one person that's going to like this, and that's the person that's trying to sell it.
Yeah. It's a good point.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Yeah. This has all been fantastic info. What else is challenging about the custom home building process?
I think one of the things, or I don't think I know, I mean, I've experienced through the custom home building process, one of the challenges that I've seen is a consumer coming in midway through the process and not understanding that there is no such thing as perfection, and there's no such thing as a perfect process, and there's no such thing as a perfect set of plans, right? So at some point in time during the project, something doesn't go according to plan and you have to pivot. And the analogy that I like to use is, if you're out at a restaurant and you're ordering an omelet, you're going to tell your server, hey, I want an omelet, Denver omelet, whatever, right? At that point, you sit at the table and you continue to enjoy your experience with whomever you're with. You don't go into the kitchen and look over the chef's shoulder and say, hey, how come there's eggshells in the pan, right? Don't worry about that. By the time that gets to your plate, the eggshells aren't going to be there. And if the eggshells are there by the time it gets to your plate, that's the time it is to have the conversation. So what I see go sideways is a consumer coming in halfway through the process and they see the inevitable mistake that happened, and the trust starts to erode with the builder, right? And then once that happens, it's a slippery slope and it can just get very uncomfortable. And then unfortunately, I've seen a lot of times by the time you get to the end of the process, like, everybody's pissed off. And it's like, it's not the way that you want to end an experience.
It's
like
ruined
that.
the magic of it all.
Exactly.
That's such a great analogy. I do like that a lot. When it comes to working around the costs and the timelines and all the things that go into a build in the region, let's talk about that.
So one of the things that we've been having success with, and I say we because I work with a number of builders, spec builders, over the past several years, is, we take a lot of the decision criteria and the unknown criteria and a lot of that stuff just out of the process by doing a spec project with a set of plans that we know and understand, sites that we know and understand, and we provide a kind of a semi-custom experience. So we'll build a spec home, offer the consumer an opportunity to come in far enough along in the construction process where a lot of or most of the heavy lifting is done, and say, hey, you can come in and put your fingerprints on the design, on the interior package, lighting, flooring, countertops, tile, things like that.
All the finishings.
All the finishes, right? and give you an opportunity to make something feel very personal and yours without having all of the brain surgery that goes along with it. So we know that we can streamline our permit process. We know that we can get our building out of the ground in a timely fashion. And that we know that once we've got all of our exterior walls and our roof on and everything, framed out the way that we want it laid out, then we can invite those conversations with the consumer and say, hey, let's go from like the halfway point to the finish line with a finite ability of things that we can personalize. The analysis paralysis, the overwhelming decision fatigue that goes into it, all of the site selection and the view lining up and, all of those things. We take care of all of that ahead of time. And we can give you an opportunity to have something that you can really make feel personal. And we can deliver that at 25, 35% less cost-wise because of the fact that we can streamline it all.
That seems like a win-win all the way around.
It usually works out pretty well.
Yeah. Has the consumer been really receptive to that?
We've had a lot of success with that model.
That's great.
Yeah. It gives the builder security, knowing that they can close the deal and get paid when they have the certificate of occupancy, or the C of O, as we call it. And they can, if that gives them the security knowing that they may not have an extra 90 to 120 days of being on the market when the carrying cost of that build is so high. You get into these builds that are $1.5, $2, $3, $4, $5 million. The carrying cost servicing the debt at the end of this can be a healthy 5-figure number every month.
And the builder's carrying that, correct? Typically, the builder's carrying the financing on that.
Absolutely, yeah. However they get their money, whether we have several different business models. Yeah. Sometimes it's a hard money investor, sometimes or an equity investor. Sometimes it's a hard money loan. Sometimes there's been enough equity that the builder has to come in and just get conventional financing. That's the most ideal, the cheapest. Mm-hmm. But either way, any of those three, right? If it takes an extra 3-4 months to close the deal after you're done with the construction, the meter's running on that debt, and then that can whittle away that profit margin. Mm-hmm. So there's value by bringing in the consumer, early enough to say, hey, we'll give you the opportunity to put your fingerprints on these things within reason. Mm-hmm. And then that gives us the security of getting out and getting, the project closed out and done and move on to the next one. Yeah. It's worked out really well.
No, yeah, that's fantastic. So there's obviously a lot that goes into building in the region, right? Truckee,
absolutely.
Tahoe, Reno, all of it.
Yeah.
Anywhere in the mountains. For someone who wants to do this and they want to start the process, where do they start? Who do they reach out to?
Ideally, somebody like myself or an architect. There has been recently people reaching out to builders directly, but that's a little bit putting the cart before the horse. If you were to come to me and say, hey, let's build a car, I would say, and how much is it going to cost to build a car, right? Or how much does a car cost, right? Well, are we going to buy a Honda or are we going to buy a Mercedes?
There's a million questions.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So the key is to try and drill down on some of that stuff before you go into the next direction, right? Because there's home builders that will build a Honda and there's home builders that won't build a Honda, right? There's home builders that'll only build a Mercedes. And then there's home builders that can only build a Honda.
So you are a liaison for all of that. You know which builder specializes in what and where.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So somebody like myself or a qualified local, regional architect, get an idea about what your goals are, where you want to do it, what your timeline is. And then this is something that we didn't talk about, but it's important to bring up. We talked about how expensive it is up here. Sometimes I've seen consumers think that, it can't be that much and I'll find a way to find a shortcut. They don't exist, right? In this region, it's just not there. So when you get that first estimate, big round number of what it's going to cost to build your house, whether it's, per square foot or, lump sum, understand that that's probably the starting point, and there may be a little bit of massaging the numbers to do some value engineering and bringing it a little bit under, but don't think that you're going to come in and find a way to save 20%. I've seen people try to do that and they kind of, maybe it's denial, like they really want to have this legacy property and there's got to be a way to do it a little bit cheaper. they buy a property and then they end up having to sell it 2 years later because, it turns out it's going to cost what they told me it was going to cost. Yeah. So understand that at the beginning. And then that's where the value of having a conversation with, a real estate professional that understands new construction and development in our region to point you in the right direction.
In our region, that's called getting a little too far over your skis, right?
That's right. Yeah.
You don't want to get a little too far over your skis.
I've seen a lot of people get out over their skis on projects, and it's actually one of our business models where we buy properties that have already had the design work done. And we've probably done this a dozen times in the past couple of years, where I have a conversation with local design professionals and I say, hey, do you have any projects that aren't going because somebody came in and they bought the dirt and then they did the plans and then they got the estimate from, 2, 3, 4 different builders and they realized, like, wow, I really can't afford this, even though that's what they were told all along. Mm-hmm. And so then they go, oh, gosh, I'm just going to sell it. And we buy that property and that set of plans. Thank you very much. Pull the building permit, get out of the ground.
It's ready to go for you.
It's ready to go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's ready to go for you guys.
Yeah.
You have to build it and then sell
it.
Yeah.
But somebody's gone through 2 years of pain and, 6-figure expense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Dave, thanks a ton.
Yeah.
This has been extremely valuable information.
Thanks for having me.
I'm going to include your contact info below for somebody that's looking to build a custom home in Truckee, Tahoe, Reno, right? You also work on the Nevada side.
That's right. Yeah.
Anywhere north, what's your typical cutoff line regionally?
Great question. So licensed in California and Nevada. I service the greater Lake Tahoe and Truckee market, right? And Reno. So down to South Lake, there's not much north of Truckee until you get to Sierraville. That's just cattle out there. So all of the Lake Tahoe Basin and then into the higher end properties down in Reno. So excellent. Arrow Creek, Montreux, things like that. Yep. Yeah. So not only, if you're interested in, I'd say if you're interested in new construction, not necessarily building, but buying, right? And I can help you understand the difference between both and then maybe find an opportunity that may not be on the market because of my network of builders that I work with.
Excellent. Again, I'm going to include Dave's contact info below. Reach out to Dave if you're looking for a nice, beautiful new home. Dave, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.